Jake Morrison walked through the bright white halls of the Galactic Academy. The walls were so clean they almost hurt his eyes. Floating screens showed information in dozens of alien languages. After 3 weeks on this space station, Jake still felt amazed by everything he saw. The 19-year-old human from Earth was part of something special. He was one of the first humans ever to join the Galactic Educational Consortium Exchange Program. Earth had only been discovered by the Galactic community 2 years ago. Most aliens still thought humans were just another primitive species from a dangerous world. Jake carried his backpack and walked toward his xenobiology class. This was his favorite subject because he got to learn about all the different alien species in the galaxy. His teacher was Professor Velanara, a beautiful 6-armed alien with blue skin that seemed to change colors in the light. She came from a species called the Celestians. The classroom was different from anything on Earth. Instead of desks, students sat on floating cushions that adjusted to each species' body type. The walls could turn into giant screens showing anything the professor wanted to teach about. Today, they showed images of different planets and their native animals. Jake was always the first student to arrive. He liked to sit in the front where he could see everything clearly. The other students usually kept their distance from him. Not because they were mean, but because they were scared. Humans came from what the galaxy called a Class 7 death world. Most alien species came from much safer planets. The first student to arrive after Jake was Zixtara. She was tall and looked like she was made of living crystal. Her body was clear with rainbow colors that moved through it like slow lightning. When she walked, her feet made tiny ringing sounds like wind chimes. Zixtara came from a planet where everything was made of silicon instead of carbon like Earth life. "Good morning, Jake Morrison," Zixtara said. Her voice sounded like music played on glass instruments. "Are you prepared for today's field expedition?" "Just call me Jake," he replied with a smile. "And yeah, I'm excited. I've never seen alien animals in person before." Zixtara's crystal body glowed a little brighter, which Jake had learned meant she was curious. "Your species has many dangerous creatures on your homeworld, correct? Are you not concerned about the predators we will observe today?" Jake shrugged. "We'll be safe. The professor said there are force fields keeping everything contained. Besides, I grew up in Colorado near the mountains. I've seen bears and mountain lions before. You just have to be smart about it." The way Jake talked about deadly predators like they were normal house pets made Zixtara's crystal body ring with nervous energy. On her world, the most dangerous creature was a small worm that could give you a mild shock. Next to enter was Blip, and Jake always smiled when he saw him. Blip looked like a cross between a hamster and a teddy bear, covered in soft purple fur. He was only about 2 feet tall and came from a species called the Millings. His people were known throughout the galaxy for being incredibly kind and peaceful. Oh my," Blip chattered in his high voice as he bounced into the room. "Today we go to see the scary animals, yes?" "Blip is very nervous about this, very nervous indeed." "Don't worry, little guy," Jake said. "I'll make sure nothing happens." "To you?" Blip's big round eyes looked up at Jake with trust and gratitude. Even though humans were supposed to be from a dangerous world, Jake had always been gentle with him. The human never made fun of Blip for being scared. Unlike some of the other students, the classroom door opened wider as Korthik entered. Jake had to look up to see his face because Korthik stood over 8 feet tall. He looked like a walking tank covered in thick armor plates that were actually part of his skin. His species, the Drakmari, were famous warriors from a desert planet. Despite his scary appearance, Korthik was one of the nicest people Jake had ever met. "Greetings, friends," Korthik said in his deep voice that sounded like distant thunder. "Is everyone ready for our journey to the preserve?" "As ready as we can be," Jake replied. "Though I think some of us are more worried than others." Korthik's armor plates shifted from dark green to a lighter shade, which meant he was amused. "Indeed. Though I find it interesting that the human from the death world seems least concerned about dangerous predators." More students filed into the classroom. There was Piptar, who looked like a walking flower with petals for arms. She came from a planet where plants had evolved intelligence instead of animals. Glex was a blob-like creature who could change his shape, though he usually stayed in a form that looked like a blue jellyfish with arms. Vrex was the most unusual-looking student. He was from a gas giant planet and had to wear a special suit, filled with methane to survive in the station's oxygen atmosphere. Through his helmet, Jake could see swirling clouds where Vrex's face should be. The last student to arrive was Nelia, a cat-like alien with silver fur and bright green eyes. Her species was known for being very agile and quick. She always sat near the back of the class and rarely spoke to anyone. Professor Velinara glided into the room, her 6 arms moving gracefully as she carried various teaching materials. Her blue skin was bright today, which meant she was in a good mood. "Good morning, my students," she said in her musical voice. "Today is a very special day. We will be visiting the preserve to observe living specimens from many different worlds. This is a rare opportunity to see creatures that most beings only read about in books." Jake noticed how several students shifted nervously in their seats. Even Korthek's armor plates had turned a darker color, showing anxiety. "Now, before we depart," the professor continued, "I must remind you all of the safety protocols. The preserve contains some of the galaxy's most dangerous predators. However, they are kept in secure habitats with multiple containment systems. We will observe from safe distances with full protection." Blip raised a small furry paw. "Professor, how dangerous are these creatures exactly?" "Well," Professor Velinara said thoughtfully, "some of them are apex predators from worlds classified as Class 8 or even Class 9 death worlds. They are capable of hunting and killing creatures many times their own size." The classroom fell silent. Jake looked around and saw that most of his classmates looked terrified. He found this strange because the safety measures sounded very thorough. "What kind of creatures are we talking about?" Jake asked with genuine curiosity. "The most impressive specimen is a shadow maw from Nexus Prime," the professor explained. "It is a perfect predator, evolved on one of the most dangerous worlds known to exist. It has never been defeated by any creature on its homeworld." "Fascinating," Jake said, which made everyone stare at him. "What does it hunt normally?" "Creatures the size of your Earth elephants," Professor Velinara replied, "though it is capable of taking down much larger prey when necessary." Zixthoras' crystal body was ringing constantly now with nervous energy. "Jake Morrison, are you not concerned? This creature could easily destroy any of us." "The force fields will keep us safe," Jake said simply. "And besides, it's probably not even hungry right now. Most big predators spend most of their time resting, not hunting." The casual way Jake discussed such a deadly creature left his classmates speechless. On their peaceful homeworlds, such predators existed only in nightmares and ancient stories. "Very well then," Professor Velinara said. "Let us gather our equipment and proceed to the transport shuttle. Today, you will witness some of the most magnificent and dangerous creatures in the known galaxy." As they filed out of the classroom, Jake could hear his classmates whispering nervously to each other about the upcoming trip. He felt excited to see these amazing animals, but he also felt protective of his new friends. If anything went wrong, he would make sure they stayed safe. The transport shuttle was unlike anything Jake had ever seen on Earth. It was smooth and white with no visible engines, floating silently through space toward the nature preserve. Through the large windows, Jake could see the massive structure growing larger as they approached. The preserve was built inside a giant dome that sparkled like a soap bubble in the starlight. It was so big that Jake could see mountains, forests, and lakes inside it. The artificial sky looked completely real, with white clouds drifting across a blue background. "Amazing," Jake whispered as he pressed his face against the window. "Professor." Velinara moved gracefully between the students with her 6 arms, checking their equipment. Each student had a bioscanner that could record information about the creatures they would see. They also wore special bracelets that would alert the preserve security system if anyone was in danger. "Students, please pay attention," the professor said as the shuttle began to land. "The preserve is divided into different sections based on the danger level of the creatures inside. We will start in the safest areas and work our way up to observing the more dangerous predators. Blip was sitting next to Jake, his small furry body trembling with nervousness. Jake friend Blip is very scared about this trip. What if the force fields stop working? What if the scary animals get out? Jake reached over and gently patted Blip's purple fur. Hey, don't worry about it. Look at all the safety systems they have here. Plus, I'll keep an eye on you. Nothing bad is going to happen. Zixtara's crystal body was ringing softly, which Jake had learned meant she was excited but also nervous. Jake Morrison, your confidence is puzzling to me. Do you not fear dangerous creatures? I respect them, Jake said thoughtfully. But fear just makes you stupid. My grandfather taught me that when we went hunting in the mountains. He said the key to dealing with dangerous animals is to stay calm and think clearly. Korthek turned his massive armored head toward Jake. Your grandfather sounds like a wise warrior. On my homeworld, we have similar teachings about facing dangerous opponents. He wasn't really a warrior, Jake explained. He was just a regular guy who grew up in the wilderness. But he knew how to read animal behavior and avoid trouble. The shuttle landed with barely a bump. Through the windows, Jake could see a beautiful landscape with rolling green hills and strange alien trees that looked like giant flowers. The air inside the dome was crystal clear, and everything seemed to glow with an inner light. Welcome to the Galactic Nature Preserve, Professor Velinara announced as the shuttle doors opened. Home to over 3,000 species from across the galaxy. Please stay close to the group and follow all safety instructions. They stepped out onto a pathway made of some kind of smooth stone that felt warm under their feet. The air smelled fresh and clean, with hints of unfamiliar flowers and growing things. Jake took a deep breath and smiled. It reminded him of hiking. In the Colorado mountains with his family, their first stop was called the Herbivore Meadows. This section was home to plant-eating animals from dozens of different worlds. Jake saw creatures that looked like floating jellyfish grazing on tall grass, and others that resembled six-legged deer with rainbow-colored fur. These animals are completely harmless, Professor Velinara explained. They eat only plants and are very gentle. You may observe them closely, but please do not try to touch them. Jake watched in amazement as a creature the size of an elephant walked past them. It had thick gray skin like a rhino, but its head was shaped like a flower with petals that opened and closed as it breathed. When it saw the students watching, it made a sound like wind chimes and continued grazing peacefully. Magnificent, Zixtara hummed, her crystal body glowing brighter with excitement. On my world, we have nothing like these organic life forms. Everything is crystalline and mineral-based. They're beautiful, Jake agreed, kneeling down to examine some purple flowers that seemed to glow with their own light. These flowers are amazing. They look like they're made of colored glass. Glex, the blob-like student, stretched one of his arms toward a small creature that looked like a cross between a butterfly and a bird. The patterns on their wings are so complex. How did evolution create such perfect designs? Evolution is the greatest artist in the universe, Professor Velinara said with pride. Given enough time, it can create beauty beyond imagination. As they walked deeper into the meadows, Jake noticed that his classmates were starting to relax. The peaceful atmosphere and gentle animals were helping them forget their fears about the more dangerous sections they would visit later. Piptar, the plant-like student, was especially happy in this section. Her petal arms waved gently in the artificial breeze as she communicated with some of the alien plants using chemical signals that Jake couldn't detect. These plants tell interesting stories, she said in her soft voice. They speak of their homeworlds and the long journey through space to reach this place. What do they say about the dangerous animals in the other sections? Nelia asked. She was the cat-like student who rarely spoke, but her green eyes were bright with curiosity. Piptar's petals darkened slightly. They say there are creatures here that even the plants fear. Predators so deadly that their presence can be felt throughout the entire preserve. Jake looked around at the peaceful meadow. It was hard to imagine anything dangerous existing in the same space as these gentle creatures. But he knew that nature was full of contrasts. Beauty and danger often existed side by side. They spent an hour in the herbivore section, recording data and observing the animals' behavior. Jake was fascinated by how different species from different worlds had evolved similar solutions to the same problems. Many of the plant eaters had developed ways to detect predators, even though they came from completely different planets. Time to move on, Professor Velanara announced. Our next stop is the aquatic section, where we will observe sea creatures from water worlds across the galaxy. The aquatic section was built around a series of connected pools and artificial rivers. The water was so clear that Jake could see all the way to the bottom, even in the deepest parts. Creatures swam through the water like living rainbows, their scales and fins catching the artificial sunlight. "Look at that one," Blip squeaked with delight, pointing at a creature that looked like a dragon made of water. It flowed through the liquid like it was part of the water itself. Jake was amazed by a school of fish that seemed to be made of pure light. They moved together like one organism, creating patterns that hurt to look at directly. "How is that even possible?" he asked. "Those are luminous swimmers from the Andromeda sector," Professor Velanara explained. "They evolved on a world with very little sunlight, so they learned to create their own." Vrex, the gas being in the methane suit, was especially interested in the aquatic creatures. "On my world, we have storms that last for centuries, but we have nothing like these water dwellers. They seem so peaceful." "Water worlds tend to produce gentler life forms," the professor said. "The water itself provides protection and cushions against violence. Most aquatic predators are much less aggressive than land-based ones." As if summoned by her words, a large shape moved through the deeper water. It was at least 20 feet long and looked like a cross between a shark and a snake. Its eyes glowed with an eerie blue light as it glided past the observation window. "What was that?" Korthik asked, his armor plates shifting to a darker color. "A deep hunter from Oceanus Prime," Professor Velanara replied calmly. "It is a predator, but not particularly dangerous. It hunts by stealth rather than aggression." Jake watched the creature swim away and disappear into the artificial depths. Something about its movement reminded him of the mountain lions he had encountered back home. Patient, calculating, waiting for the right moment to strike? "Are we going to see any really dangerous predators?" he asked. Professor Velanara's skin shimmered with anticipation. "Oh yes, Jake Morrison. Our final stop will be the apex predator section. That is where we will observe the Shadow Maw." The mention of that name made every student except Jake shift nervously. They had all heard stories about the legendary predator, but none of them had ever seen one in person. "The Shadow Maw," Zixthara whispered, her crystal body ringing with fear. "I have read about this creature. It is said to be the perfect killer." "Perfect. Killers don't exist," Jake said simply. "Every animal has strengths and weaknesses. The key is understanding what they are." His casual attitude toward facing one of the galaxy's most dangerous predators left his classmates staring at him in amazement. They were beginning to realize that growing up on a death world had given Jake a very different perspective on danger and survival. The walk to the apex predator section took them through a series of security checkpoints. Each checkpoint scanned their identification bracelets and made sure they were authorized to enter the dangerous areas. Jake noticed that the walls got thicker and the force field generators became more numerous as they went deeper into the preserve. "Students, please stay close together," Professor Velanara said as they approached the final checkpoint. "From this point forward, we are entering areas that contain creatures capable of killing most galactic species within seconds." The security door was massive, made of some kind of metal that gleamed like silver, but looked much stronger than anything Jake had seen before. When it opened, he could hear a low humming sound from the multiple force field generators running at full power. Beyond the door was a corridor with windows on both sides. Through the transparent walls, Jake could see different habitats designed to look like alien homeworlds. Each habitat was separated from the corridor by multiple layers of energy barriers that shimmered like heat waves. The first habitat they passed contained something that looked like a giant spider made of metal. It moved with mechanical precision, but Jake could tell it was alive by the way its multiple eyes tracked their movement through the corridor. "That is a chrome weaver from the industrial world of Mechanis 7, Professor Velanara explained. It evolved to hunt in factories and cities. Its web can cut through steel." Blip made a small squeaking sound and tried to hide behind Jake's legs. Blip does not like spiders, especially giant metal ones. "It can't get out," Jake said reassuringly. "Look at all those force fields." "You'd need a nuclear bomb to break through that much protection." The next habitat was darker, filled with what looked like black fog. Occasionally, Jake could see glowing red eyes moving through the darkness, but whatever creature lived there stayed hidden from view. "What's in that one?" Melia asked, her cat-like ears flattened against her head with fear. "Shadow stalkers. From the dark side of Umbros Prime," the professor replied. "They are pure predators that evolved in permanent darkness. They hunt by sensing fear and can become invisible to most forms of detection." Zixtara's crystal body was ringing constantly now, creating a sound like breaking glass. "Professor, are you certain these containment systems have never failed?" "Never," Professor Velanara said confidently. "The preserve has been operating for over 200 years without a single incident. The safety systems are absolutely reliable." They continued down the corridor, passing habitats that contained increasingly terrifying creatures. Jake saw something that looked like a living tornado with teeth, and another creature that seemed to be made of pure electricity, crackling inside a specialized chamber. Korthek's armor plates had turned almost black with anxiety. "Even on my warrior world, we have no creatures like these. How do they exist in nature?" "Evolution finds a way," Jake said, studying each habitat with scientific curiosity rather than fear. "Every environment creates its own perfect predators. These are just adapted to really harsh conditions." Finally, they reached the end of the corridor and stepped onto the predator observation deck. This was a large platform that overlooked the preserve's most dangerous habitat. The deck was surrounded by reinforced barriers and protected by the strongest force fields in the entire facility. Below them stretched a dense jungle that looked like something from Earth's prehistoric past. Massive trees with black bark reached toward the artificial sky, their branches forming a canopy so thick that most of the habitat was hidden in shadow. The air inside the habitat seemed to shimmer with heat and humidity. "Welcome to the Shadow Maw habitat," Professor Velanara announced. "This environment has been designed to perfectly replicate the jungle world of Nexus Prime, one of the most dangerous planets ever discovered." Jake leaned against the barrier and looked down into the jungle. For several minutes, nothing moved. The habitat seemed completely empty except for the alien plants swaying in an artificial breeze. "Where is it?" Glex asked, his blob-like form pressed against the observation window. "Patience," the professor said. "The Shadow Maw is a master of stealth. It could be anywhere in that habitat, completely invisible until it chooses to reveal itself." As if summoned by her words, something moved in the shadows far below. Jake caught a glimpse of something large and dark flowing between the trees like liquid shadow. Then it was gone again, leaving only the rustling of leaves to show it had been there at all. "Did you see that?" Piptar whispered, her petal arms trembling with fear. "Barely," Jake replied, his eyes scanning the jungle for any sign of movement. "It's fast and smart. It knows we're up here watching." Suddenly, the creature stepped into a patch of artificial sunlight, and everyone gasped. The Shadow Maw was even more impressive than the pictures in their textbooks had suggested. It stood about 8 feet tall at the shoulder, with a body that seemed to be made of living darkness. Its scales were so black they seemed to absorb light, making it look like a hole cut out of reality itself. The creature's head was shaped like a dragon's, but sleeker and more predatory. Its eyes glowed like molten gold, and when it opened its mouth, Jake could see fangs as long as his forearm. Its powerful muscles moved under its dark scales as it walked, each step completely silent despite its massive size. "Magnificent," Professor Velanara breathed. The perfect apex predator. On its homeworld, nothing can stand against it. It has never been defeated in combat by any creature. The Shadow Maw looked up at the observation deck, its golden eyes seeming to study each student individually. Jake felt like the creature was taking his measure, deciding whether he might be prey or a threat. It was an unsettling feeling, but also strangely familiar. He had felt the same way when encountering mountain lions in Colorado. "It's beautiful," Jake said quietly. "Look at how perfectly it's designed for hunting. Every part of its body is built for killing." His classmates stared at him in shock. While they were all terrified of the creature below, Jake seemed genuinely impressed by its deadly efficiency. "How can you call it beautiful?" Blip squeaked. "It could eat all of us in seconds." "So could a grizzly bear," Jake replied. "But that doesn't make them any less amazing. Nature doesn't care about good or evil. It just creates whatever works best for survival." The Shadow Maw continued to stare up at them for several more minutes, then turned and began to stalk back into the jungle shadows. Its movement was so fluid and graceful that it seemed to flow rather than walk. "How big do they get?" Jake asked. "That one is actually on the smaller side," Professor Velinara replied. "Adult males can reach 12 feet in height and weigh over 2 tons. They are capable of hunting creatures much larger than themselves." As the group watched the habitat, hoping for another glimpse of the legendary predator, warning lights suddenly began flashing throughout the observation deck. A loud alarm started blaring, and automated voices began speaking in dozens of different languages. "Attention all personnel," came a voice in clear Galactic Standard. "Emergency situation detected. Containment breach in Sector 7. All visitors must evacuate immediately to designated safe zones." The students looked around in confusion and growing panic. Sector 7 was exactly where they were standing. "What does that mean?" Zixthara asked, her crystal body ringing like an alarm bell. Professor Velinara's 6 arms moved frantically as she checked her emergency communicator. Her blue skin had turned pale with shock. "There has been a malfunction in the containment systems. The primary force field generators are failing." Jake looked down at the Shadow Maw habitat and felt his heart rate increase. The shimmering barriers that had been protecting them were flickering like dying light bulbs. As he watched, one of the force fields completely disappeared with a sound like breaking glass. "Everyone stay calm," Jake said, though he could feel adrenaline starting to pump through his system. "The backup systems will kick in." But even as he spoke, more force fields began to fail. The barriers that had seemed so strong and reliable were shutting down one by one. In the habitat below, the Shadow Maw had stopped moving and was looking up at the observation deck with what Jake could only describe as interest. "The creature," Rex said through his methane-filled helmet, "it knows something has changed." The Shadow Maw took a step toward the base of the observation deck, its golden eyes never leaving the group of terrified students above. Jake realized with growing concern that the platform they were standing on was only about 30 feet above the habitat floor. For a creature that could leap and climb like the Shadow Maw, that might as well be ground level. "Professor," Korthak said, his deep voice tight with worry, "how long until the backup systems activate?" Professor Velinara was still frantically trying to contact Preserve Security on her communicator. "I don't know. This has never happened before. The systems are supposed to be foolproof." Another force field failed with a loud crackling sound. Then another. Jake counted the remaining barriers and realized they were running out fast. In the habitat below, the Shadow Maw had begun to move again, this time heading directly toward the observation deck with purpose in every step. "We need to get out of here," Nelia said, her voice high with panic. "Right now." The last force field barrier flickered and died with a sound like breaking glass. Now, there was nothing between the observation deck and the Shadow Maw except 30 feet of empty air. The massive predator stood at the base of the platform, its golden eyes fixed on the group of terrified students above. Jake's classmates panicked. Zixthara's crystal body rang like a fire alarm as she backed away from the edge. Blip let out high-pitched squeaks of terror and tried to climb up Korthak's armored leg. Even the massive warrior was shaking, his protective plates shifting to their darkest color. "We're all going to die," Glex moaned, his blob-like form trembling uncontrollably. "That thing is going to kill us all." Professor Velanara's 6 arms moved frantically as she continued trying to contact security. "The communication systems are down? The emergency lockdown has cut us off from the control center. Can we break down the door?" Nelia asked desperately, her claws extended as she scratched at the sealed exit. "Those doors are designed to contain creatures like the Shadow Maw," Korthik replied grimly. "If we cannot break them from this side, neither can the Predator. But that also means we cannot escape." Below them, the Shadow Maw began to move. It backed up several steps, then suddenly launched itself toward the observation deck with incredible power. Its muscular legs propelled its massive body upward like a black missile. The creature's claws scraped against the metal platform as it landed. On the edge, just 20 feet away from the terrified students, everyone screamed except Jake. Instead of running or cowering like the others, the human stepped forward. He placed himself directly between the Shadow Maw and his classmates, spreading his arms wide to make himself appear larger. "Jake Morrison, what are you doing?" Zixthura's voice cracked with panic. "Move away from that creature! Get back here, you crazy human!" Korthik shouted, but his voice was filled with fear rather than anger. Jake ignored them. His heart was beating fast, but his breathing stayed controlled and steady. His grandfather had taught him this technique during their hunting trips in the Rocky Mountains. When facing a dangerous animal, panic would get you killed. The key was to stay calm and think clearly. "Everyone get behind me and stay low," Jake said in a steady voice. "Don't make any sudden movements and don't run. Running will trigger its chase instincts." The Shadow Maw fully pulled itself onto the observation deck with fluid grace. Up close, it was even more terrifying than Jake had imagined. The creature stood 8 feet tall at the shoulder, with muscles that rippled under its light-absorbing scales. Its claws were as long as kitchen knives and looked sharp enough to cut through steel. The Predator's golden eyes locked onto Jake's brown ones. For a moment, human and alien apex predator stared at each other across 10 feet of space. Jake could smell the creature's wild scent, like ozone and jungle flowers mixed with something darker and more dangerous. The Shadow Maw opened its mouth slightly, revealing fangs that gleamed like white daggers. It let out a low rumble that Jake felt in his chest more than heard with his ears. The sound made the metal platform vibrate under their feet. "Easy there, big guy," Jake said softly, never breaking eye contact. "Nobody wants any trouble here. We're not in your territory and we're not threatening your food." The creature tilted its massive head slightly as if confused by this strange prey that showed no fear. On its homeworld of Nexus Prime, every living thing either ran from the Shadow Maw or died fighting. This small bipedal creature was doing neither. Jake began to move slowly to his right, keeping his movements deliberate and non-threatening. The Shadow Maw's eyes followed him, but it didn't attack. Behind him, Jake could hear his classmates whimpering with terror, but he kept his focus entirely on the Predator in front of him. "That's right," Jake continued in his calm voice. "You're not really hunting right now, are you? You're just confused? New smells, new environment, weird little creatures making noise above your head." The Shadow Maw took a step closer, lowering its head until it was almost level with Jake's. The human could feel the creature's breath on his face, warm and smelling of alien vegetation. Those golden eyes studied him with an intelligence that was both fascinating and terrifying. "Jake, please get away from that thing," Blip whispered. From somewhere behind him, "It's going to eat you." "No, it's not," Jake replied without taking his eyes off the Shadow Maw. "Look at its body language. Its tail isn't lashing, its ears aren't flat against its head, and its muscles aren't bunched for a strike. It's curious, not aggressive." The Predator circled Jake slowly, its massive paws making no sound on the metal deck. Jake turned with it, always keeping himself between the creature and his classmates. He could see the alien's nostrils flaring as it scented him, trying to understand what kind of creature he was. "You know what I think?" Jake said conversationally. "I think you're smart enough to know we're not Your usual prey. We don't smell right, we don't act right, and we're in a place that doesn't feel like your hunting grounds. The shadow moth stopped circling and sat back on its haunches like a giant cat considering its options. The position made it look less threatening. Though Jake knew it could still strike faster than the human eye could follow, Professor Velinara's voice came from behind him, filled with amazement and terror. Jake Morrison, how are you doing this? That creature should have killed you by now. Animals aren't evil, Jake explained, still watching the shadow maw carefully. They don't kill for fun or because they're angry. They kill because they're hungry or scared or protecting their territory. Right now, this guy is just trying to figure out what we are. The shadow maw leaned forward and sniffed at Jake more closely. The human could see his own reflection in those golden eyes. For a moment, predator and prey examined each other with mutual curiosity. On your homeworld, you're the king of the jungle, Jake said softly. Nothing challenges you, nothing threatens you. But this isn't your world, and we're not your usual neighbors. Slowly, carefully, Jake crouched down to make himself smaller and less threatening. The movement caused several of his classmates to gasp in fear, but the shadow maw just watched with interest. Double quotes, see? I'm not challenging you, Jake continued. I'm showing respect. In the animal kingdom, that usually means something. The massive predator considered this for a long moment. Then, to everyone's amazement, it lowered its own head in what almost looked like a nod of acknowledgement. The creature's golden eyes never left Jake's face, but the human could see something changing in its expression. That's it, Jake said. Encouragingly, we understand each other, don't we? You're not really interested in hunting us. We're too strange, too different from what you're used to. Behind him, Jake could hear his classmates breathing heavily with terror and amazement. None of them could believe what they were witnessing. A human from a Class 7 Deathworld was having a peaceful conversation with one of the galaxy's most feared predators. The shadow maw stood up again, but this time its movements were relaxed rather than threatening. It walked past Jake toward the edge of the platform, pausing to look back at the human one more time. Go on, Jake said gently. Go back to your jungle. We'll be leaving soon and you can have your territory back. For a moment, the shadow maw seemed to consider staying. Then it made a decision that surprised everyone. The creature let out a low rumble that sounded almost like a purr, turned away from the humans, and leaped gracefully back down into its habitat. Jake stood up slowly, watching as the massive predator disappeared into the jungle shadows below. Only then did he allow himself to take a deep breath and relax his shoulders. Is it gone? Blip asked in a tiny voice. It's gone, Jake confirmed, turning back to his amazed classmates. And security should be here soon to fix the containment systems. Professor Velinara stared at him with all 6 of her arms trembling. Jake Morrison, what you just did should have been impossible. That creature could have killed you in seconds. Jake shrugged as if he hadn't just faced down one of the galaxy's most dangerous predators. Sometimes the best way to deal with a dangerous situation is to stay calm and think it through. Panic gets you killed, but understanding gets you home safe. The silence on the observation deck was broken only by the sound of heavy breathing and Zixthara's crystal body still ringing softly with leftover fear. Jake stood calmly at the edge of the platform, looking down into the jungle where the shadow maw had disappeared. It's really gone, Nelia whispered, her cat-like ears slowly rising from their flattened position. I can't believe it just walked away. More like jumped away, Jake corrected with a small smile. Did you see how graceful that leap was? The thing could probably jump 50 feet if it wanted to. His casual tone made everyone stare at him again. While they were all still shaking with terror from their near-death experience, Jake seemed completely relaxed. He acted like he had just finished having a normal conversation with a friend instead of facing down the galaxy's most feared predator. Jake Morrison, Korthik said slowly, his deep voice filled with amazement. What you just did defies all logic. That creature should have killed you instantly. How did you know it would not attack? Jake turned away from the platform edge and looked at his classmates. They were all watching him with expressions of awe, confusion, and disbelief. He scratched his head, trying to think of how to explain something that seemed obvious to him. I didn't know for sure, he admitted. But I could read its body language. My grandfather taught me how to do that when I was little. He said most animals don't want to fight unless they have to, because fighting means risking injury. And injury in the wild usually means death. But this was the Shadow Maw, Piptar said, her petal arms still trembling. The most perfect predator in the known galaxy. It has never been defeated by any creature. Maybe not defeated in a fight, Jake said thoughtfully, but that doesn't mean it's stupid. Smart predators pick their battles carefully. They don't waste energy on prey that might not be worth the risk. Blip was still clinging to Korthak's armored leg, his purple fur standing on end, but Jake Friend showed no fear. How does any being show no fear when facing certain death? Jake knelt down so he was at eye level with the small alien. I was scared, Blip. Fear is just information telling you to be careful and pay attention, but panic is what gets you killed. My species learned a long time ago that the best way to survive dangerous situations is to think clearly and stay calm. Your species, Vrex said through his methane-filled helmet, his gaseous form swirling with agitation. Humans come from a Class 7 death world. What kinds of predators did you face on Earth? Bears, mountain lions, wolves, venomous snakes, sharks? Jake listed casually. Plus things like avalanches, flash floods, forest fires, lightning storms. Earth tries to kill you in about 100 different ways every day. Glex's blob-like form shuddered. And yet your species not only survived, but became the dominant life form. How is this possible? We learned to adapt, Jake explained. We figured out how to read danger signs, how to avoid threats, and when we couldn't avoid them, how to deal with them calmly. Every human child learns basic survival skills before they're 10 years old. Professor Velanara had been unusually quiet during this conversation. Her 6 arms moved nervously as she processed what she had witnessed. Jake Morrison, the academic literature about Deathworld species does not adequately describe what I just observed. Your ability to remain calm under extreme predator pressure is unprecedented. It's not that special, Jake said with a shrug. Any human would have done the same thing. We're taught from childhood that panic kills, but clear thinking saves lives. The sound of approaching footsteps echoed through the corridor outside the observation deck. Heavy boots and the whir of mechanical equipment announced the arrival of the preserve's emergency response team. Security is finally here, Nelia said with relief. About time. The sealed door hissed open, and a team of armed security personnel rushed onto the deck. They were led by a tall, blue-skinned Andromedian, wearing high-tech armor and carrying what looked like an energy weapon designed to stop large predators. Is everyone safe? The security chief asked, his scanner sweeping the area for signs of the escaped Shadow Maw. We detected a total containment failure in this sector. We are all unharmed, Professor Velanara replied, though her voice still shook slightly. But there was an incident with the Shadow Maw. The security chief's face went pale. The Shadow Maw escaped containment? How many casualties? None, Jake said simply. It came up here, looked around, decided we weren't worth the trouble, and went back to its habitat. The security officer stared at Jake like he had just claimed to be immortal. The Shadow Maw approached. You directly and then retreated without attacking? That is impossible. These creatures do not retreat from anything. Well, this one did, Jake replied. Maybe it was just having a good day. One of the junior security officers was running a bioscanner over the deck. Sir, I'm detecting Shadow Maw scent markers all over this platform. The creature was definitely here, and recently. How long was it up here? The security chief asked. About 10 minutes, Professor Velanara answered. It had direct access to all of us for the entire time. The security team exchanged amazed glances. In their training, they had learned that Shadow Maw encounters typically lasted less than 30 seconds before the predator killed everything in sight. A 10-minute peaceful encounter was beyond their understanding. We need to file a full report about this incident, the security chief said. The Galactic Predator Research Institute will want to interview everyone who was present. As the security team worked to restore the containment systems, Jake's classmates continued to discuss what they had witnessed. Word of the incident began to spread through their personal communication devices to friends and family across the galaxy. "My parents will never believe this," Zixtara said, her crystal body finally returning to its normal clear coloration. "I barely believe it myself, and I was here." "The other students at the academy are going to think we're making this up," Glex added. "No one will believe that a human talked a Shadowmaw into leaving peacefully." Korthik looked at Jake with something approaching reverence. "On my homeworld, warriors train their entire lives to face dangerous predators. Yet you, with no weapons and no armor, faced the ultimate predator and emerged victorious without even fighting." "I didn't win anything," Jake protested. "We just reached an understanding. That creature could have killed me any time it wanted to." But it chose not to," Professor Velinara said thoughtfully. "And I believe that choice was influenced by your behavior. You demonstrated something that our xenobiology texts never adequately described about Deathworld species." "What's that?" Jake asked. "The ability to communicate with predators on their own level," she replied. "Most species in the galaxy evolved on peaceful worlds. We never learned to speak the language of hunters and survivors, but you did." Within hours, news of the incident had spread throughout the Galactic Academy. Students from dozens of species gathered to hear the story firsthand from those who had witnessed it. Jake found himself surrounded by curious aliens wanting to know how a human had faced down a Shadowmaw and lived to tell about it. "It wasn't that big a deal," Jake kept insisting to anyone who would listen. "I just stayed calm and treated it like any other wild animal." But the more he tried to downplay the incident, the more impressed his listeners became. To them, treating a Shadowmaw like any other wild animal was perhaps the most incredible statement they had ever heard. Professor Velinara spent that evening writing her report about the day's events. The human exchange student demonstrated survival capabilities that exceed our current understanding of Deathworld adaptations, she wrote. His ability to remain calm under extreme predator pressure suggests that Earth humans possess psychological traits that may be unique among known sapient species. She paused in her writing and looked out the window at the stars. Somewhere out there was Earth, a world so dangerous that it had produced beings capable of staring down the galaxy's most feared predator without breaking a sweat. Further study of human survival psychology is strongly recommended, she continued typing. We may have significantly underestimated the capabilities of this species. Meanwhile, Jake was in his dormitory room, writing an email to his family back on Earth. "Had an interesting day at school today," he typed. "Saw some cool alien animals at the nature preserve. One of them reminded me of that mountain lion we saw last summer in Colorado. Hope everyone back home is doing well. He didn't mention the Shadowmaw encounter at all. After all, what was there to write about? He had met a wild animal, they had understood each other, and everyone had gone home safely. Just another ordinary day in the life of a human among the stars, but across the galaxy, Jake Morrison had become something of a legend. The human who had faced the perfect predator and emerged victorious through nothing more than calm courage and Deathworlder instincts. It was a story that would be told for generations, proving once again that sometimes the most dangerous creature in any room was the one that didn't look dangerous at all.